The world paused the moment the video leaked. It started quietly, almost innocuously, with a few whispers on forums, a couple of users posting short clips on social media. But within minutes, what had been hidden for years was suddenly in the public eye, raw and unfiltered. Shock rippled through the internet like a lightning strike, millions of viewers staring at screens in disbelief. Every smartphone in every city, every laptop in every office, every tablet in every home seemed to flicker in unison with the same haunting revelation. The clip was undeniable. There was no escaping it. Within moments, hashtags exploded across Twitter. Number Diddy leaked, number justice for victims, number life sentence now began trending. TikTok videos dissecting the footage went viral, reaching millions of views in a matter of hours. Clips were slowed down, analyzed frame by frame, cropped, zoomed in, and republished. Every angle was explored. The world's reaction was a mix of anger, disbelief, and morbid curiosity. Memes began circulating, mocking Diddy's previously untouchable public persona. Yet behind the humor, a serious and chilling conversation was unfolding. People weren't just entertained, they were horrified. News outlets scrambled to cover the leak, reporting live from the streets, tracking viral trends, and interviewing shocked fans. Journalists debated the authenticity and implications of the video, questioning why this footage had remained hidden for so long and why the original 50-month sentence had seemed so inadequate. Television anchors leaned forward, voices heavy with disbelief, describing the clips in painstaking detail, each revelation more explosive than the last. Social media comment sections flooded with furious commentary, some calling for immediate arrest, others demanding justice in the harshest terms. The public had made up its mind, and the pressure was monumental. Legal experts were suddenly in high demand. Analysts on cable news dissected the footage, comparing it to prior testimonies, prior convictions, and known patterns of behavior. Every frame became a point of discussion. Lighting, audio, discrepancies, background details, timestamps all scrutinized for legal relevance. The leaked video wasn't just sensational content, it was a potential damning piece of evidence that threatened to unravel a carefully managed public narrative. Analysts spoke in measured tones, but the subtext was clear. This was unprecedented, and the consequences could be historic. Victims, some silent for years, began to come forward. Empowered by the leak, they posted their own statements, screenshots, and corroborating details online. Social media became a battlefield of revelations, with stories emerging that had long been suppressed. Each account painted a darker picture, layering evidence upon evidence, each one amplifying the public's outrage. The leak acted as a catalyst, transforming years of secrecy into a tidal wave of accountability. The world watched, knowing that no legal defense could ignore the flood of testimony now public. Meanwhile, inside Diddy's circle, panic was spreading. Close advisors scrambled to assess the damage, but the speed of the leak made containment impossible. Internal discussions shifted from damage control to crisis management. Phone calls were frantic, emails were sent in a blur, and every attempt at narrative control failed against the sheer velocity of information now in the public sphere. Public relations teams, once confident in their control of the narrative, were now powerless. The social media storm had eclipsed any strategic messaging. By the end of the first day, the implications were clear. The leak wasn't just an embarrassing incident, it was a turning point. It threatened to overturn the past, to challenge the adequacy of prior sentences, and to redefine public perception of justice in this case. The world had been watching, but now it was participating. Every retweet, every clip, every comment was a declaration. No one would look away. Legal authorities took notice. Courts, prosecutors, and victim advocates were now in motion. The story had outgrown its digital confines and entered a space where justice, public opinion, and media scrutiny collided. As night fell, the leak continued to dominate conversations. Analysts predicted emergency legal action, public outrage reached fever pitch, and Diddy's once untouchable image began to fracture under the relentless glare of exposure. Behind closed doors, attorneys began drafting motions, evidence was collected, and petitions were prepared. By morning, the world would wake to a reality that had changed overnight. Nothing would ever be the same. The stage was set. The public was watching. Legal teams were mobilizing. And one man's life, his reputation, and his freedom now hung by the thread of a single viral video. The reckoning had begun, and there was no turning back. The following morning, the news of the leak had already reached every corner of the country. Courtrooms that were usually quiet and methodical were now charged with an unprecedented energy. Judges, attorneys, and prosecutors were in constant motion, responding to calls, reviewing the leaked material, and preparing for what would soon be called an emergency hearing. The speed with which events were unfolding left little room for hesitation. What was once a scheduled procedural matter had transformed into a national spectacle, and the legal system was scrambling to keep up. Inside the courthouse, security was tighter than ever. Reporters jostled for position outside the doors, cameras and microphones trained on every entrance. The public had been given little information officially, but the speculation was relentless. Social media feeds were flooded with predictions, rumors, and live commentary, each account amplifying the sense of urgency. A frenzy was building, fueled by every leaked frame, every screenshot, and every viral post dissecting the video. Everyone seemed to know something, yet no one had the full picture. The judge presiding over the emergency hearing, a stern figure known for her meticulous attention to detail, appeared on the bench. Her presence alone seemed to demand silence, but the energy in the room was palpable. Attorneys representing both the prosecution and defense approached with deliberate steps, files clutched tightly in hand. The courtroom was filled with a tense mixture of anticipation and dread. This was no ordinary proceeding. It was a trial by exposure, a legal storm precipitated by a single leak that had already changed the course of public perception. Prosecutors opened their statements with a tone of urgency that mirrored the mood outside. Every word was measured, yet charged with the weight of accumulated outrage. They laid out the sequence of events, describing how the leaked footage had come to light, how it corroborated prior evidence, and how it represented a clear violation of the law. The language was precise, legalistic, but beneath the formalities lay a moral conviction, a demand for justice that could no longer be ignored. Each phrase seemed to resonate beyond the walls of the courtroom, echoing into living rooms, offices, and public squares across the nation. Defense attorneys, meanwhile, faced the nearly impossible task of mitigating the impact of the leak. They argued procedural technicalities, questioned the authenticity of certain clips, and attempted to frame the situation as a matter of public frenzy rather than legal fact. Yet, their words were often drowned out by the magnitude of public scrutiny. Social media feeds, news reports, and viral commentaries were relentless. Every objection, every motion, every appeal seemed to be under constant observation, as if the public itself had become a co-courtroom, passing judgment alongside the legal system. Victims' statements were read aloud, one by one, each carrying the weight of years of silence and suffering. The courtroom fell silent as testimonies, once hidden and unheard, were given voice. The combination of leaked evidence and these personal accounts created an atmosphere so charged that even seasoned legal professionals felt the gravity of the moment. The courtroom was no longer just a space for legal argument. It had become a stage for justice itself, a crucible where reputations, freedom, and the truth were being tested under an unforgiving spotlight. As the hearing progressed, motions were filed at lightning speed. The prosecution requested an immediate reassessment of the prior sentence, arguing that the new evidence warranted the maximum legal consequence. The defense countered, citing precedent, procedural fairness, and the potential for appeal, but the momentum was overwhelmingly in the prosecution's favor. The leak had not only ignited public outrage, but had also strengthened the case in ways that legal maneuvering alone could not counter. Judges, attorneys, and observers alike recognized that history was being made in real time. By the end of the first day of the emergency hearing, the courtroom had shifted from tense anticipation to decisive action. Preliminary rulings indicated that the prior sentence would be reevaluated immediately, and the judge emphasized the seriousness of the evidence now available. Outside, crowds gathered, news vans lined the streets, and social media feeds continued to explode with every detail. The legal system had been forced into motion by a single viral video, and the consequences for Diddy were becoming increasingly unavoidable. As night descended on the city, the echo of the day's proceedings lingered. Legal teams worked late into the evening, witnesses were contacted, and motions were prepared for the next session. The public remained glued to updates, every tweet, every news alert a pulse in a rapidly beating story that refused to slow. One thing was clear. The emergency hearing had fundamentally altered the trajectory of justice. Diddy's world, carefully constructed over decades, now faced the unrelenting pressure of exposure, scrutiny, and inevitable accountability. The stage was set for the next phase. The courtroom drama had begun, but the real story, the confrontation of truth, the weight of evidence, and the impact on lives forever changed was just beginning. And as the world waited, the tension built, knowing that the coming days would determine not only a sentence, but the very legacy of a figure once thought untouchable. The morning after the first emergency hearing, the city was in chaos. News outlets blared every development, while social media platforms erupted with opinions, conspiracy theories, and viral clips. Every frame of the leaked video was analyzed, replayed, and dissected with relentless scrutiny. Headlines screamed urgency, but the undercurrent was far more than curiosity. It was outrage, disbelief, and a collective demand for accountability. The public had become an unstoppable force, each reaction feeding into the next, amplifying the pressure on the legal system and on Diddy himself. For decades, Diddy had built an empire not just of wealth, but of influence, connections, and a carefully cultivated image. Yet, in the span of hours, that image was fractured, leaving only fragments visible to the world. People who had once admired his business acumen and charisma were now questioning everything: his integrity, his decisions, and the very foundations of his reputation. Social media commentary ranged from disbelief to anger, from speculation about hidden motives to demands for harsh punishment. The intensity of the outcry had surpassed anything even the most seasoned media professionals had anticipated. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was equally charged. Attorneys scurried between chambers, judges reviewed motions at unprecedented speed, and clerks worked overtime to manage the sudden influx of filings. The emergency hearing had transformed the usual procedural rhythm into a whirlwind of rapid decision-making. Each new development, each statement read aloud, and each motion filed seemed to add fuel to a fire that could not be contained. Observers in the courtroom noted the change in Diddy himself. Once confident and composed, he now appeared tense, his demeanor reflecting the growing awareness of the stakes. The leak had not only provided evidence, but had reshaped public perception in a way that legal arguments could not easily counter. Defense attorneys tried to refocus the court's attention on procedural matters and technicalities, but the power of public scrutiny was undeniable. Every objection was filtered through the lens of the viral footage, every motion scrutinized as if the courtroom itself had been brought into the court of public opinion. Legal strategy now had to contend not only with precedent and law, but with the intensity of a global audience that demanded justice in real time. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, crowds gathered in protest and in solidarity with the victims. Signs waved, chants filled the streets, and media crews captured every moment for broadcast. The city had transformed into a living commentary on the case, with the emergency hearing serving as the epicenter of a storm that showed no signs of abating. Analysts debated the implications of the leak, dissected potential sentences, and speculated about the ripple effects across the entertainment and business world. It was clear that this was not just a legal matter, it had become a cultural and social event, defining the moment and capturing the attention of millions. Diddy's team attempted damage control, holding brief press conferences, issuing statements, and engaging with media in an attempt to frame the narrative. Yet, every word was met with skepticism. The leaked video had already cemented a perception in the minds of the public and the legal authorities alike. Attempts to clarify, justify, or explain were often drowned out by viral clips and online commentary, which replayed the evidence repeatedly. The narrative was no longer fully under anyone's control. It had taken on a life of its own, driven by the immediacy of digital media and the intensity of public reaction. In court, the second day of the emergency hearing began with witnesses called to testify about their knowledge of events depicted in the video. Their statements were precise, emotional, and unflinching. The jury, when present, listened intently, while cameras broadcast every moment to news outlets. Each testimony added layers of corroboration, reinforcing the prosecution's case and further weakening the defense. The courtroom had become a theater of truth, where evidence, testimony, and public perception converged in a way that was both dramatic and consequential. Legal analysts on live broadcasts speculated that the speed and severity of the proceedings were unprecedented. Emergency hearings of this nature were rare, but the leak had created circumstances that left no room for delay. Every moment counted, every detail mattered, and every decision could alter the outcome permanently. The combined weight of public scrutiny, media pressure, and compelling evidence was creating an environment in which the courtroom itself seemed to operate under a magnified intensity, every ruling resonating far beyond its walls. By midday, it was clear that the public's influence was shaping not only the narrative, but also the momentum of the case. Every social media post, every viral clip, and every public reaction fed into the courtroom dynamics. Prosecutors used the widespread attention to emphasize the urgency of justice, while defense attorneys struggled to argue against the invisible force of collective scrutiny. Diddy, once untouchable in his sphere of influence, now faced a dual challenge: the legal battle inside the courtroom and the court of public opinion outside it. As the day drew to a close, the sense of inevitability grew stronger. The leak had acted as a catalyst, transforming speculation into evidence, opinion into outrage, and public attention into a powerful driving force. Observers understood that the proceedings were not merely about legalities. They were about accountability, reputation, and the consequences of exposure. The emergency hearing had set the stage for decisions that could not be undone, and the world was watching, waiting, and judging in real time, every heartbeat amplifying the tension and urgency of the unfolding story. The fourth day of hearings began with a sense of urgency that was almost palpable. Every corner of the courthouse seemed charged with tension, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the weight of the world's attention. News crews lined the streets, live streams captured every moment, and the social media ecosystem churned nonstop. Every second brought a new analysis, a new theory, a new viral clip dissecting every nuance of the leaked footage. The public, now fully invested, had transformed into an omnipresent jury whose gaze seemed to pierce even the most guarded corners of the courtroom. Inside, Diddy's demeanor had shifted. The confident aura he once exuded was replaced by visible strain. He spoke less, his responses measured, each word carefully chosen to avoid escalation. Advisors whispered in his ear, occasionally offering guidance that he barely seemed to hear. The reality of the situation was sinking in. This was no longer a case that could be managed with influence or charm. The leaked video had become undeniable, and the legal implications were intensifying by the hour. Every piece of testimony reinforced the gravity of the charges, and every rebuttal seemed to falter under the combined weight of evidence and public scrutiny. Prosecutors entered the courtroom with renewed vigor, their strategy precise and unrelenting. Witness after witness was presented, each corroborating key aspects of the events captured in the video. Their statements were detailed, emotionally resonant, and meticulously documented, leaving little room for doubt. The jury, now fully engaged, absorbed every word, every gesture, and every inflection. The prosecution's methodical approach was designed not only to prove guilt, but to make the courtroom a reflection of the public sentiment that had erupted online. It was as if the viral storm outside had found its echo in the solemnity of judicial procedure. Meanwhile, defense attorneys attempted to counter with technicalities and procedural arguments, but the pressure was relentless. Every objection seemed to be met with precise rebuttals, and every motion to suppress evidence faced intense scrutiny. The courtroom atmosphere was charged with tension, a tangible sense of a tipping point approaching. Legal experts watching remotely described the proceedings as extraordinary and historically fast-paced, noting that the combination of viral exposure and undeniable evidence had created a perfect storm that left little room for maneuvering. Outside, the public response was escalating. Demonstrations had grown in size and intensity, with people gathering to demand justice. Social media platforms were flooded with hashtags, viral clips, and commentary, creating a digital echo chamber that reinforced the narrative of guilt. Analysts debated the psychological impact of the leak, arguing that the exposure itself had shifted the trajectory of the case. The courtroom and the streets had merged in influence, creating a dual arena where perception and law collided in a way that had never been seen before. Diddy's legal team attempted strategic recalibration, meeting in hushed tones behind closed doors. Plans were made, statements drafted, and appeals considered, but the momentum seemed impossible to reverse. Every attempt at damage control was countered by new developments. Another witness, another viral clip, another wave of public outrage. It became increasingly clear that the case had transcended the legal framework. It had become a cultural moment, a story that was defining not just a trial, but the very notion of accountability for public figures. The tipping point arrived when a key witness, previously reluctant, gave testimony that directly contradicted the narrative Diddy's defense had constructed. The courtroom fell into a hushed tension, broken only by the quiet scribbling of notes and the occasional cough. The witness's credibility was reinforced by corroborating evidence, including phone records, documents, and timestamps that aligned precisely with the leaked video. The prosecution's strategy had coalesced into an almost unstoppable force, leaving the defense scrambling to maintain composure. Analysts describe this moment as critical. "This is where the case pivots," one commentator noted. "Everything up to now has been building pressure, but this testimony shifts the momentum decisively toward conviction." The combination of evidence, public scrutiny, and courtroom dynamics has reached a point of no return. The phrase resonated across social media, where hashtags and commentary spread like wildfire. The public perception, once reactive, had solidified into a powerful narrative of accountability, demanding consequences that could no longer be ignored. By evening, the courthouse corridors were electric, with speculation and whispered urgency. Attorneys, journalists, and court staff all sensed that the case had reached a pivotal juncture. Every decision made in the next hours would carry amplified significance. Outside, protesters and supporters alike felt the weight of history in the making. It was clear that the emergency hearing had crossed a threshold. The case was no longer just legal, it was a moment that would define public consciousness, cultural perception, and the very career of a man whose influence had once seemed untouchable. As the day concluded, the realization settled in for everyone involved. The tipping point had arrived. The leaked video, the testimony, and the relentless public scrutiny had created a chain reaction that could not be reversed. Diddy faced not only the legal ramifications of his actions, but the irreversible shift in his public image. The courtroom, amplified by media and social perception, had become a decisive arena, and the outcome now seemed not just inevitable, but monumental. The world was watching, and nothing would ever be the same. The day after the tipping point, the atmosphere around the courthouse was electric with anticipation. News vans lined every street, their satellite dishes pointing skyward, ready to beam the latest developments to millions of viewers worldwide. The courthouse steps were crowded with journalists, activists, and onlookers, all desperate for a glimpse of Diddy, all eager to catch the slightest hint of what was to come. Social media had become a force multiplier, amplifying every soundbite, every gesture, every tense pause inside the courtroom. Public attention had reached an unprecedented scale, and the weight of scrutiny pressed on every person involved in the case. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution moved decisively, capitalizing on the momentum built over the past days. Their presentation was relentless, almost surgical, highlighting contradictions in the defense's narrative, exposing weaknesses, and emphasizing the irrefutable evidence tied to the leaked video. Each piece of testimony, each document, each digital record was presented with precision, leaving little room for doubt. Jurors listened intently, their expressions carefully neutral, yet betraying the weight of the case. Every eye was focused, every ear attuned, as the prosecution painted a narrative that was as comprehensive as it was damning. Diddy, seated alongside his legal team, appeared visibly drained. The confident poise he once carried was replaced by subtle tension, a jaw clenching, fingers tapping nervously, eyes darting across the courtroom. Advisors whispered continuously, offering guidance, suggesting phrasing, warning against missteps. Yet the reality was unavoidable. The leaked video had become a defining factor, one that no amount of argumentation or legal maneuvering could fully erase. The courtroom, amplified by the media, had transformed into a stage where public opinion and judicial scrutiny merged into a single, unavoidable force. Outside, public reaction was reaching fever pitch. Protesters held signs demanding justice, their chants echoing against the courthouse walls. Supporters, fewer in number, tried to defend Diddy, but their voices were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of outrage. Social media platforms were saturated with hashtags, trending clips, and heated debates. Analysts dissected every angle of the case, speculating on potential outcomes and the broader implications for public figures whose actions were recorded and circulated online. The leak had created a new paradigm, a moment in which reputation, accountability, and media convergence collided with unprecedented force. The legal drama intensified when a surprising development occurred. A new piece of evidence was introduced, directly corroborating the most damaging elements of the leaked footage. The courtroom erupted in a flurry of activity. Cameras zoomed in, attorneys scrambled to review, and journalists scribbled furiously. The evidence was unassailable, sourced from a third-party verification system, and its authenticity was beyond dispute. The defense struggled to respond, attempting to question its relevance and timing, but the impact was immediate and severe. Jurors exchanged subtle glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in as the weight of accumulated proof became undeniable. The media coverage reached a crescendo as analysts and commentators dissected every moment in real time. Headlines blared across screens worldwide. New evidence intensifies case against Diddy. Public outrage surges amid courtroom revelations. Leaked video, proven accurate life sentence looms. Social media platforms became pressure cookers of public sentiment, where opinions shifted rapidly, speculation ran rampant, and the narrative of accountability became a global talking point. The leaked video had not just exposed one man, it had catalyzed a conversation about power, responsibility, and the consequences of public actions. As the day wore on, the courthouse itself seemed to vibrate with tension. Every step echoed ominously in the hallways. Every whisper carried the weight of history unfolding. Attorneys worked feverishly, reviewing strategies, adjusting statements, preparing for the inevitable cross-examinations that would shape the next stages of the trial. The jury, increasingly aware of the public spotlight, absorbed the proceedings with a focus sharpened by the understanding that their decision would resonate far beyond the courtroom walls. Every detail, every nuance, mattered. By evening, the consequences of the new evidence had become clear. The prosecution had effectively cornered the defense, leaving them with limited options and diminishing credibility. Public opinion, already overwhelmingly critical, had solidified into a potent force demanding accountability. For Diddy, the reality of the situation was stark. The viral leak, compounded by corroborated evidence and relentless media scrutiny, had left him in a precarious position from which recovery seemed unlikely. The fallout had begun in earnest, and the world was watching every move, every decision, every moment with unblinking intensity. The stage was now set for what everyone anticipated would be the most critical moments of the trial. The next hearings would determine not only the immediate legal consequences for Diddy, but also the enduring impact on his career, reputation, and personal life. The courtroom had become a nexus of justice, media spectacle, and societal judgment, a place where every action and every word carried amplified weight. As night fell over the city, the public continued to monitor, speculate, and debate, fully aware that the coming hours could change the course of history for one of the most influential figures in the entertainment industry. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that carried the weight of inevitability. Every camera was fixed, every microphone pointed, every journalist poised to capture the moment that would define the end of a saga that had captivated the world. Diddy sat rigidly, his once confident demeanor replaced by a quiet tension, eyes staring ahead, almost as if bracing himself for the verdict that was about to be delivered. Outside, crowds gathered, holding their breath, phones raised, streaming live feeds, watching history unfold in real time. The judge entered, robes flowing, a presence that commanded attention and respect. The murmurs died instantly. The clerk read the charges aloud, and then the silence returned, heavier than before. The room seemed to shrink as every person present felt the gravity of what was about to happen. Diddy's legal team exchanged quick, tense glances, whispers of last-minute strategies unheard by the general public, but heavy with anxiety. The jury filed back into the courtroom, each step resonating like a drumbeat echoing the tension in the room. Finally, the foreperson rose to deliver the verdict. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on them. The words that followed seemed to stretch, elongated by the collective anticipation of the crowd and the millions watching across the globe. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts," the foreperson announced, voice steady yet heavy with finality. A collective gasp swept through the room, punctuated by the click of cameras and the hushed reactions of spectators. Diddy's jaw tightened, and his hands clenched instinctively as the words settled in, confirming the inevitable conclusion that had loomed over him since the leak of the damning video. The judge prepared to deliver sentencing. The weight of the moment pressed on everyone, the courtroom still and expectant. Given the severity of the offenses and the irrefutable evidence presented, the judge began, voice resonant. It is the judgment of this court that the defendant shall serve a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The words landed with the force of a thunderclap, reverberating through the walls, across social media feeds, and into the collective consciousness of the public. Murmurs erupted, some in shock, some in relief, as the finality of the judgment reverberated outward. Diddy's reaction was a study in controlled despair. He absorbed the words silently at first, blinking rapidly, eyes glistening, the reality crashing over him in waves. His legal team leaned in, murmuring reassurances, though even they could not disguise the weight of defeat. Outside, supporters' protests faltered, their voices muted in the wake of the final judgment. Meanwhile, critics and journalists amplified the outcome, sharing instant analyses, dissecting the implications for the entertainment industry, and debating the broader consequences of accountability for public figures in the digital age. In the days that followed, the world seemed to pause and reflect. Media outlets flooded with retrospectives, legal experts offered commentary on precedent, and social media exploded with reactions, memes, and debates. Diddy's influence, once seemingly unassailable, had collided with an unavoidable reality. Accountability, once delayed, could not be evaded forever. The leaked video, once a fleeting shock, had catalyzed a chain of events that changed the trajectory of his life irrevocably. Fans wrestled with the dichotomy of admiration and condemnation, while the industry confronted the implications of visibility, power, and responsibility. Legal scholars dissected the trial with meticulous care, highlighting how digital evidence, public perception, and strategic prosecutorial decisions intersected to produce an outcome that was both historic and instructive. The case became a reference point, a benchmark for future proceedings involving high-profile individuals whose actions were captured, disseminated, and scrutinized by millions. It was more than a verdict, it was a societal statement, a reflection of shifting dynamics in media, law, and public expectation. Diddy himself faced a long process of adjustment, transition, and reflection. His public persona, meticulously cultivated over decades, was now overshadowed by the trial, the leaked video, and the life sentence. Interviews with former colleagues, collaborators, and insiders revealed the shockwaves of the case, contracts dissolved, projects canceled, and reputations reevaluated. Yet, within the darkness of consequence, the broader narrative sparked discussions about ethics, influence, and the fragile balance between fame and accountability. Ultimately, the trial's conclusion was both an ending and a beginning. It closed a chapter marked by scandal, viral exposure, and public scrutiny, yet it opened a dialogue about transparency, justice, and the power of evidence in the digital age. For Diddy, the outcome was absolute and irreversible, a life sentence confirming the world's gaze could no longer be deflected. For the public, it was a lesson in vigilance, a reminder that even the most powerful figures are subject to the consequences of their actions. And for history, it became a case study in the interplay between media, celebrity, and justice, an indelible moment that would be referenced, debated, and remembered for years to come. The courtroom emptied slowly, the echoes of judgment lingering in the air. Outside, the world continued to watch, to talk, to digest. A chapter had ended, but the ripples would continue, shaping perceptions, influencing conversations, and reminding all that no one, no matter how influential, exists above accountability. The leaked video had ignited the process, and the life sentence had solidified its power, a final testament to the convergence of truth, justice, and public consciousness.